I will start by introducing Paul Fisher. Paul is head of the IAB in Australia. The IAB is the trade body for all things online. There are IABs across the world, and it's Paul's job to champion internet marketing, which must be a real challenge, Paul. I'm sure we'll find out more about that later. Next to Paul, we have Linda Wayman. There's a lot of talk at the moment about sexism and misogyny. I'm glad to say that Linda is here purely on merit, not because she's a woman. Linda is, among other things, Ad Person of the Year for Western Australia from Campaign Brief. She also leads what is arguably the most successful radio franchise in the world. So thank you, Linda, for being here as well. We also have Michael Beach, who is Deputy Editor of The West Australian. And The West Australian is a proud sponsor of tonight. And thank you, Michael, award-winning journalist representing the West. We have Nigel Bussy at the end, who's head of the School of Marketing here at Curtin. Nigel, I've told him tonight, he gets to play Switzerland on this panel. He can be neutral and give us the academic opinion on what these guys are saying. And then finally, by no means least, we have Adam Elliot, head of sales for Channel 7, who's come over from Sydney to be with us tonight. So thank you all very much. I look forward to your contributions. So without further ado, I'll start off with the panel. They have been briefed on this question beforehand, so expect their best answers now. It's sort of a Curtin-related question. And the question is, what's next for our brightest marketing minds? So what are the challenges, what are the opportunities that young people in our industry can look forward to in this time of huge transformational change? And Nigel, so I'll start with you because you're on the front line with young people. So
okay.
I'll let you kick off.
Thanks very much. Well, there's an old French proverb that translates roughly as the more things change, the more they stay the same. And obviously we are living through a period of incredible change, particularly the digital revolution. But it's not entirely unprecedented. There have been other periods in history that have seen very dramatic change in the lifetime of single individuals. And I think the point I would make is that the fundamentals that young people need going into a professional career in many ways are the same now as they've always been. They need to have a really strong set of values. They need to know who they are as a person. They need to have personal integrity. They need to have a real passion about what they do and a commitment to it. They need to have a sense of curiosity and an openness to new ideas. And they need to be flexible and adaptable. And those things have always been true. So although the young people are going to go into an industry which is rapidly changing, and although there's a lot of disruptive technological changes happening, those same underpinning values that have always been important will continue to be important in the future.
Cool. Paul, would you like to?
I think the speed, at the pace of change is going to be one of the most challenging things for all of us, irrespective if you're a young marketing mind or, like some of us, an old marketing mind. One of the most common phrases I hear as I travel around is that the amount of change that is going to happen in the next 2 years is going to be greater than the change we've seen in the last 10 years. If you think about where Facebook was 2 years ago, where Twitter was, where the iPad was, the iPhone, broadband pricing plans and access plans and speeds, we've had phenomenal change in the last 2 years. So if you then magnify that even more so, the next 2 years I think are going to be extremely challenging. My advice, and I don't know if we're here to give advice or not, but is to still follow the audience. We're getting hung up on technology and it's not about the device. People are still watching television, they're still reading newspapers, they're still reading magazines, listening to the radio, going to the cinema, looking at shopper dockets probably. So I would say that in this crazy world of disruption, I think, as Nigel said, have your own values to get you through. Try and learn some life skills such as priority and time management. Still go to the gym and get rid of the stress when you can, but try and follow the audience and not get too worried about the technology.
My thoughts on that really are around putting order to chaos and keeping up with the technology, but understanding what it actually means, where it reaches, and also understanding your audience as well. And some of those are good old-fashioned values, as we were talking about before, but for me it's it's really about the challenges that the incredible number of channels and the fragmentation of the audience actually represents. Understanding that audience and really drilling down, so doing the right research and then putting it all together in a strategic way, because and that's putting order to the chaos, in my opinion, and I think that's one of the biggest challenges that future marketers and current marketers have, because it is extremely daunting sometimes, I think, for people to understand that, and the accountability that comes with it will, I think, increase as well.
Look, I agree with, I think, all the comments. I think the one thing that, and I'll talk from a Seven point of view, the one thing that I suppose we've been looking at for a number of years and what we're continuing to look at is definitely, it all comes down to the content. Fragmentation's here, it's not going anywhere, it's only going to get harder and more challenging. You can either hide from it and sit back and pretend that it's not going to sort of take over, or you can actually embrace it and use it to your advantage. For us, in our business, what we're doing is we've really got some clear plans that we've built over the last few years, and more importantly, we're adjusting over the next 3 to 5 years where we're going to be using these platforms. I love how everyone said internet was going to kill television. Well, it isn't going to happen. It's about how we use that platform, how we use those eyeballs to aggregate our audience, and particularly the content that we create. And for us, content is king. We need to continue to invest in it, and then look at the technology, look at social media, look at Twitter, look at all these different technologies that are emerging, and look at how we can aggregate those eyeballs through our content, extend our content, have a different conversation with those eyeballs, and ultimately bring it back to our business and our brand as well.
I'm from a journalism background, so I asked one of our senior journalists yesterday how she would answer this question. And she said she was told not to go into journalism, it was a waste of time because the Daily News had just shut down. As she's now won a Walkley Award and she freed a guy from prison a few years ago. My point is that your basics don't change. What I do, we find stories, we present stories. Our marketing department tells people why they should care about those stories in our newspaper. People have to have a passion for what they do. They have to be prepared to work hard, be prepared to work long hours, and to be adaptable and flexible as things are changing, but the fundamentals haven't changed at all.
Thanks, everybody. I'll throw it open to all of you. So if we have a question, please raise your hand.
Given the changes with technology and certainly within the advertising and marketing world, certainly over the last 2 years, the advances of big data, do you think that the skill sets of people both entering university and leaving it need to be somewhat looked at? And certainly from an agency perspective, the people that we're now employing are probably more with mathematics, physicists, statistical analysis background than necessarily the history degree that I did 20 years ago. So how do you think that that's going to change the youngsters that are leaving universities now?
Yeah, look, Leo, I think there's no question that technology and data is becoming more and more important, and we need it to, and I suppose we're embracing it. Definitely from an education point of view, the people and the skill set required to, suppose, enter, I think, the industry now versus maybe 10, 15 years ago or 20 years ago when a lot of us did, it does require a lot more than, just learn on the job. You definitely need to understand maths, you need to understand that data and need to be able to interpret it and then use it to actually then help build a marketing plan, which does require more than just data as well. It requires, I think, a lot of gut feel and experience and understanding of your consumer and your consumer set, and also the role that different channels play as well in the mix. So I think that's important. I think one of the biggest challenges we've got, though, is the people in the business. And if I talk from our point of view, we've got a whole lot of TV experience in our business. We're obviously owned by the West, but we need to now start to upskill our people more into online, more into magazines, more into press, more into social media. They need to start really upskilling. And so I think you've got two trains. You've got the people coming in, but then there's, I think, an enormous job to do with the existing teams that we have to really get them, I suppose, upskilled to be able to adequately move with the change as fast as it's required, because it's coming quick.
Can I make a point? I think that some of the things that Michael said before about basic values, I would always look for someone with curiosity. I think that, and an ability to adapt, and I think curiosity is a forerunner of adaptability. And I'd look for intelligence, and that intelligence can be applied to analytics and so on, but you also need your creative people and people who are risk takers. So you don't often get that in one bundle. So I'd start with curiosity first, and I do like people with brains.
And hard work.
And hard work, oh yeah, that's table stakes.
We are seeing new job titles coming out though in the industry, and Lee, you'd be aware of this from the Omnicom connections, but there's creative technologists, there's data scientists, and I hear now that since the space shuttle program has shut down, NASA, there's a lot of ex-NASA people, this is true, I'm not making a joke here, a lot of ex-NASA people are on the market, and some of the big global agency groups have started hiring ex-NASA analysts now to come across into the media business. I think that's fantastic. If the media industry in any country starts to get ex-NASA scientists, stockbrokers, yield analysers or analysts from aviation airlines in terms of optimising return on inventory and seats, for example, I think that can only be a good thing. But I think I kind of agree with Adam's point, and my version of that point is that it's not about trying to get these new skills. I think the real challenge is then going to be how you integrate those people into the agencies or the businesses. My fear is that you're all going to go out looking for these ex-NASA employees, and you're going to hire them and you're going to give them these fancy titles, and they're going to sit in the dark room in the corner of the agency or the media business, and they're going to be like web developers were 15 years ago. Okay, still are. And, you know, the challenge then is let's get these people in our business, but as Adam said, then let's use them to actually educate and inform and tell other people how they do what they do and how it can help them be creative, for example.
Have you ever tried to sell to an actuary?
No.
I did on Tuesday. It was bloody hard work. 3.5 hours later, I don't know if we got anywhere.
I completely agree with the need to update the curriculum, and that's something that we're very actively looking at the moment here in the School of Marketing at Curtin. And a university is like the cliched big ship. It's very difficult to turn around. But we work very closely with industry. I mean, upskilling was just mentioned, and we are very aware as academics and educators that we have to upgrade our own skills and our own knowledge. And for example, we're sending one of my colleagues off shortly to Sydney. Oh, it's an interesting sound effect. One of my colleagues who teaches advertising is off to Sydney to do an intensive 1-week specialist course in all aspects of digital media to get the latest knowledge and then to bring that back to the students here. Another initiative that we've done here is to run a series of extracurricular workshops through something called the Curtin Business Club, where we've brought in specialist industry people in things like Google Analytics, marketing metrics, CRM, and delivered those as extra workshops for the students who are obviously keen enough and motivated enough to go to those sessions. So you mentioned the skills of the students coming into the university. That's harder for us to control. But yeah, we really do need to update and augment the curriculum, and it's a challenge, but we're working on it.
I wouldn't mind just asking Mel Feinberg from the Heart Foundation, because we had discussed this subject earlier, and you had an interesting viewpoint on the challenges that your organisation and others in your category face as well.
Look, when I left uni with my marketing communications degree, I wanted to go and work in an ad agency and do something really exciting. By accident, I've actually built my career in government and health and charity sector, and I honestly wouldn't change it for the world. I absolutely love what I do. It's fantastic, and I do get to work on fantastic ad campaigns as well, which is great. But from the client side, so I get to make the decisions, which is all the better. I guess, but you know, when I left uni, it was never my plan, and it was never on my radar. Absolutely, we see things coming out from, you know, particularly FMCG sector, doing really fantastic, really innovative, creative work. The Share a Coke campaign, I'm led to believe, was from a really junior person, a bright marketing mind. I would like your ideas. How do we get those people, how do we get the brightest minds to use their powers for good and go and work and make the world a better place instead of a little bit fatter and a little bit worse?
You're an altruistic bunch. What advice would you give to graduates about whether they should be pursuing the dollar or doing some good for the world?
I think one answer to your question is you let them run free as you can. I mean, there's got to be a bit of structure, but I don't know, I think we're just getting a little bit too ordered for a medium that is supposed to have been built on creativity. And as we move more towards the scientific end, we're starting to get a bit too binary, and we're getting almost bound by rules and regulations and standards and procedures. I think one way to flush out this creativity is to enable it, whichever place they're in, and that is based on the assumption that the creativity is everywhere. Unfortunately, if you're also asking about how do you get these people working on not-for-profit, I think that's a greater challenge unless you're Google and you can give your employees a day a week to work on whatever they want. Maybe that's an idea we should all try, but I can't see it happening anytime soon.
I don't think you can make people be good. It's really up to the individual. All you can do is encourage, support, urge, but ultimately, I mean, I think that's probably something you can't really teach. It has to come from within. So that's a pretty tough question.
Anybody else?
Well, I totally agree. It has to come from within. And I think fate sometimes takes a hand to bring it out, as it did with you, in a way. And I think that's the only thing you can really rely on.
Might move on to another topic then. You've mentioned change and the rate of change, and obviously the whole media marketing landscape is continually being reinvented at the moment. If you had to pick one mega trend, one part of that change, and talk about it as an opportunity or as a challenge, what would that be for each of you?
For us, mobile. And I think that presents a challenge for all mediums, but for radio, it's a opportunity as well. In fact, it's a huge opportunity because radio is mobile. 50% of radio listening is still in the car, and so we've got a big advantage there. But I think in terms of trends for marketers, it's actually getting their head around how to get out meaningful messages through mobile. And I'm sure that Adam would talk about IPTV as well, which is, huge in that, the huge potential there as well.
Oh, look, it's enormous, and it's exciting. I've got to say, it's the internet and IPTV, what the NBN's going to do. All of that sort of bundled together is, for us, super exciting. A lot of people are saying that it's going to reduce our audience numbers dramatically, and we're going to see people just ripping content down from all over the world. And you know what? That's happening now. We know it's happening now. You can see it. Yes, it's going to be easier, but for us, as long as we've got our strategy in place, which is around us creating as much locally produced content as possible, we can embrace that technology. It can enable us to really, I suppose, control the distribution of that content, when we want it, how we want it, to who we want it, and we can bring advertisers along through that journey across all of those different layers. That for us is exciting. That's the direction that we're heading, but it'll be content-led. There is so much choice out there, but what we know and what we can see now is that when we get the content right, people will come in droves and they'll be excited about it. They'll be on Twitter and Facebook commenting on X Factor or The Voice or whatever the big show is at the moment. You've only got to go on to Fango, our social media app, which we've got over 600,000 people that have downloaded the app. We've got over 1 million people checking into shows over the last 9 months. The way that people have such a strong opinions, the way that we can use this technology to our advantage is fantastic. It's exciting, and I can't wait till IPTV really kicks in, because I think it's going to just change the landscape again for the better, and for advertisers particularly, it's going to create so much more opportunity to really have a different conversation than just that simple 30-second execution, but follow that viewer wherever they're touching our content that we develop. So, yeah.
I see our challenge is staying relevant to our audience, which is Perth, Western Australia. We're a local newspaper, we have to talk to our local audience. And to what that is finding, going back to finding things that they want to read, they want to know about, what they care about, and then we have to figure out, as the platforms change, how we distribute that to people and keep running a business at the same time. So we're identifying parts of that business that we can expand. So we're not contracting, we're expanding. You probably noticed our business section is expanded quite significantly in the last year. We've started up a new magazine while everyone else has been shutting them down, and it's now quarterly at the moment. It'll be monthly next year. So we're looking for new opportunities. Also at the same time, we're in a really interesting company where we're the newspaper arm in Western Australia. We have a national TV arm, we have a magazine arm, and we have half of Yahoo 7. And it's really just in its infancy how we start talking to each other. I mean, Adam and I only met each other 20 minutes ago. And what's going to happen with our company is there's a lot of smart people scattered around the country, is getting them all working together and understanding what we do. And I really think once you get people into a room, bounce off each other, and it's getting back to what Linda's saying, we want creative, smart people. They're the ones you'd love to clone. And the more that we can talk to each other, trade ideas, and often the best idea comes from not the one where you started off yourself. It's bouncing something back and forth. So that's kind of where I think our next big step is.
Well, you asked about the biggest mega trend flowing from the latest technology, and I'm old enough to remember a very long ago song from John Lennon called Power to the People, and back then it was probably just a right-on pseudo-revolutionary slogan, but I think that's the biggest change, people power, because what the new technology has done, and the user-generated content, of course, is to change the locus of control from the people who own the media to everybody. And of course, the implications are quite scary, as we see with the Twitterati and the power that they can wield. So it's really quite small groups of people, even individuals, can now have an enormous influence on the outcomes of major corporations and major marketing campaigns by virtue of the easy access to the technology and the reach of that technology. Just think about the power of, to take a simple example, every time you stay in a hotel now, maybe you book through one of those online sites, and TripAdvisor or whatever asks you for your review of the hotel, or you buy a book on Amazon and you're invited to review the book. And those comments, of course, can sway opinion. They have a reach via the new technology that ordinary individuals would have never had before. So to me, that's the really fundamental shift that's happened in the last few years.
I think one of the greatest threats and opportunities to us all is privacy. And I think that we are all, whether you're a media owner, a content producer or aggregator, a marketer, a brand owner, or a platform connector, we're all amassing enormous amounts of data from our consumers, whoever those consumers are. And we have a responsibility to be transparent about that. We have a responsibility to inform the consumers that this data collection is going on. We have a responsibility to show them how the data is being collected and what it's going to be used for. And ultimately, when they've got all that information at their fingertips, I think we have a responsibility to give them the choice as to whether they want that practice to carry on or not. And I think that certainly as an industry body, one thing we're championing both locally and globally is the concept of information and choice, or notice and choice. And some of the businesses represented up here have made huge inroads in terms of their privacy agreements, the way that they collect data, the options that they offer consumers to opt in, opt out, turn on, turn off. The situation in Europe right now is that the government there, the European Parliament, have legislated in Holland that it is illegal to drop a cookie onto a consumer without their prior consent. So you cannot market to that person unless and until they, on the pop-up window, every time they come to your page, a pop-up window comes up and says, we collect cookies, do you agree, disagree, whatever. It's a terrible user experience. And fortunately in Australia, we're a lot more pragmatic about the landscape, The industry has a responsibility to self-regulate and to be responsible about its collection and use of data, and then about its notice and choice to consumers. And we need to carry on practicing that, otherwise we run the risk of going the way of the Europeans.
So, Paul, can I ask you a question? What about, therefore, Facebook settings? Do you see looming issues with that in terms of people's privacy, and also risk for marketers, the way that it's now set that if you like something, then it follows you around forever, and your friends? So you're the expert on that stuff.
No, I mean, look, Facebook are a member of ours, so I do need to be careful about what I say. But I think
Trust me to ask a difficult
no,
question.
it's a good question,
it's
because
the old journalism in
any news story about the abuse or the complacency of customer settings or the use of their data, that whether it gets leaked, it could be the Google Street View car, it could be some Facebook stalker. Any of those stories hurt the whole privacy argument, and they're the stories that are going to inspire or motivate the legislators to want to come in and legislate our industry. So we need to make sure that we don't let that happen, and the only way to do that is to be responsible and be proactive. Whether that's about settings, whether it's about information and choice, I think it's about all of those things.
Cool, thanks guys. Yes please, Curtis.
In a previous life I was head of training at Fairfax, and every year I offered up about between 40 and 45 traineeships to mostly graduates from universities. Just be interested to hear from the panel. I mean, we've heard, and the theme tonight is about the best and brightest minds, and we've got a lot of them in the audience tonight. I'd love to hear, and we've heard all about content is king. There's a great move towards a whole bunch of new media, new outlets. What's your respective investments in the youth of today? So, do you have internship or traineeship programs where you take a set number of people every year, that, or do you have work integrated learning programs, or traineeships or internships where people come in and, as part of their studies, they, come and work in work placements, that type of thing? Because I think it's really important for people in this room to hear what the opportunities might be in a really tangible way.
Yeah, I can start. The West has always had quite a rigorous traineeship program. Anywhere from, I think sometimes it'd be 10, a dozen that we take from university, and we whittle to 200 people down through a serious process of interviews, and then take them on for, this is in the editorial part of it, to do a cadetship over a year, and through that year we put them through all the various parts of the newspaper. Now the challenge for us is that I think we took about 10 3 years ago, 6 the 2 years ago, and only 2 last year. So that is contracting because as our business, the number of jobs is contracting. And you're probably well aware that newspapers across the country and across the world have been pulling back their staff. We have not as bad as everybody else, but we've had to contract as well as the businesses are being streamlined. So our challenge is to keep training new people, and it's one where we wrestle with at work. We have been recently. How do we keep bringing in new people and keep refreshing, which we need it as a business while we're facing these new challenges. So that, and also a lot of those, what we're doing now is we're taking we've got 23 country papers, so we're bringing people through the country, and then after their experience there, then into the city paper. So that is the way we've changed it around.
92.9 is basically an incubator for East Coast radio stations. So really, half the people on air that you hear if you drive around Sydney, they're mine. Same with Fox in Melbourne. We take it very seriously. It's part of our role. When we were Austereo, it was definitely part of our role. We'd recruit from the regions, so that regional pipeline is very important to us. Now that we're owned by Southern Cross, we've got all those regional radio stations on tap anyway, so I don't have to steal them from them anymore. So we take talent development very, very seriously indeed, and we've just lost one of the young women that we employed has gone to Fairfax Digital, and her predecessor was in the same job and went to the same job at Fairfax Digital. And as I said at Team Meet today, I feel like I'm a pipeline for Fairfax these days, as well as Austereo on the East Coast. We take it very, very seriously. We don't have internships. We're not that sort of organisation. I'm the beneficiary of being a cadet at the West Australian, and I came from this university to be a cadet at the West Australian, so there's a nice symmetry there. But talent for us is incredibly important. People in radio are very passionate, and you often grab them even before they've been to uni, and we have to develop them and develop their talent and their skills and everything, and we're very good at doing that, I think, and we love it. It's really something that we're very passionate about.
We don't have a program as a very small industry body, but my kind of rather trite answer would be, if you as marketers keep spending more money, the industry will grow and create more jobs, and then we can actually pay the interns.
I'll be honest with you all, we've been pretty bad at it. I reckon probably you guys are a fair way ahead of where we've been at. We've probably the last 18 months started to really focus on training and development of our people, but before that there weren't any really key structured programs. It was very much about work on the job, and you worked hard and you got taught by your managers and other people within the organisation, and that's sort of the way it was working for a long time. But in the last sort of 18 months to 2 years, we've now built a whole sales program around training and development, which happens from the very first day that someone enters our organisation through to our senior management staff. We're now starting to invest a lot of time into, particularly with our more senior management, a lot of university scheduling of time across the year, which is really about upskilling them in marketing and business skills, which again our teams never had. So we're probably, I think, still a fair way behind a lot of other organisations out there, but the great thing about it is now there's a great focus on it, and we're not doing any internships, but it's something that literally 12 months ago we looked at, and it's something that we absolutely have on our radar as something to look at into the future, because it's clearly been very successful for a lot of companies out there.
Somebody rang me up last week from the Eastern States doing a research project, and her first question was, what is the fundamental purpose of the degree? What are you for? And to me, the answer is obvious. We're about helping young people get jobs in the industry. We're about preparing people for their professional careers. That's the number one purpose. So being connected with industry and work-integrated learning, which the questioner mentioned, is absolutely vital to us. And it's something we've tried to do very proactively for many, many years. Of course, we always want to do more. But just as some examples, the final year public relations students have to spend in their last unit a month actually working with an organisation. They don't attend class, they go out and work. In all the streams, some of the final year units involve real life clients coming in, so it's like an on-campus internship, if you like, where the client comes to the uni and the students create campaigns, advertising campaigns, marketing strategies for the clients. We have people like Adam come in and teach the whole units, which Adam has done in the past. We work very closely with professional bodies and so on. It's absolutely essential for us to do that, so we're always looking for opportunities, and we could always do more, but we're very mindful of it.
Personally, I love internships. They're the cheapest employees we have, and because they haven't got a job yet, they're usually the hardest working, so I can recommend them. A question?
Sorry, Paul, you touched on something that I've been fascinated about for the last sort of 6 months. There's been some really interesting changes in the media landscape, not necessarily to do with audience figures, but I think it's all related, about their corporate structures and profitability. And Paul, you raised a point, spend more money to make media companies strong, and I think that's a really important thing that maybe we've lost over the last sort of 6 months with the likes of Fairfax, Channel 10, bless them. I don't think outside of online there is a media company that's doing extremely well. So my question is around...
Sorry, none are doing well, did you say?
Oh, no, well, not as well as you used to do. I mean, even Channel 7, number one market position, would you want more money right now?
Of course.
Yes, there you go. My question is around, and we've talked about data and we've talked about changing audience, is how do you monetise that? So the three sort of media companies up there, what's the single biggest thing that you guys are doing in this changing technology, and then how do you get paid for it effectively? And is there some sort of legacy or laggard sort of with the audience research, which means you can't monetise those sort of things? I know Commercial Radio Australia, it's a 5-year contract. TV TARPs haven't changed in the entire time I've been doing this, and well, we won't even talk about Roy Morgan. So is that some of the problem, and how do you kind of fix that as well as you're trying to monetise your changing audience?
Good question.
Don't be nice to him.
Yeah.
We're not going to
be. Digital radio doesn't make any money. It hasn't even been rolled out in the regions yet. But that's a long-term, very long-term proposition. Radio has been very lucky, I think, in a way, because it is mobile, and they've also jumped on a lot of these alternative platforms very quickly. And we've also seen the opportunities in our content as well. So our websites are monetised. They don't make huge amount of money. The majority of our money comes from our radio, just traditional radio buys. But all our responses now have to be multi-platform. And so if we didn't have those options that are pretty well developed now, then we wouldn't be able to respond to briefs like we do. And obviously the majority of that is from the radio buys, but it's about integration. And I know that's a bit of a much bandied word, and I use it in the sense of integrating clients' messages through those platforms that we've got. And so we've developed a creative solutions team over the last 3 years that really has a look at that and can come up with really innovative responses to clients' issues. We have a very strong customer service ethos as well. But when we started in social media, and I think social media is something that, you know, we should talk about as well, and is that a monetising opportunity, if you like. And we actually thought, gosh, this is going to reduce our website numbers because suddenly our online audience will be fragmented. But in fact, that hasn't happened. What it's done is it's actually become part of the content loop. It's extended our own brands, and we've used it tactically, and we've used it to engage our listeners as well. And there's a pretty big differentiation point in how we communicate using those two different platforms. So I think that we've managed to integrate that also now, the social media element, into our business really, really well. And that we can offer a sort of a seamless offering to our clients and indeed our listeners, because we've got both stakeholders, obviously. So I'm not sure if that answers your question, Kieran, but so most of our money is still made out of radio. We're increasing our income, our revenue stream online, and social media will one day be very important to us as well. It's very important to us now in a content loop, but it will become important in terms of our clients as well. Facebook, I'm sort of trying to still think about how that works for marketers, because it has to be engaging. It's not just another billboard. And that, to me, is one of the challenges as well of how, as a marketer, how to make social media engaging for your brand. We're lucky, we're an entertainment brand. It works. You know, whether it's going to work for another brand, that's debatable, but I've got a story about that to tell later.
Just on another tangent, do you see these new digital offerings as part of your businesses as being there to drive the old channel, as it were, or are they're potentially standalone businesses in the future?
Yeah. Look, no, I think they're all going to be bundled together as a company, a broadcasting company in our case, because I think that it offers a one-stop solution for a client as opposed to separate solutions as well. And it also helps with the identification and the targeting of an audience as well, because some of these large internet platforms, you don't know who's looking at it. You might be getting 2 or 3 million hits or something a day, but who are they and who cares, sort of thing. So I see the digital radio things. There's opportunities there. We've got some great music. There's Buddha Radio. We've got Radar Radio. We've actually used one of our digital stations as a sponsorship vehicle for Pink, for example. We've turned the whole radio station over to Pink to pre-promote her concert when she was coming to Australia and got it sponsored and so on. There's huge opportunities there. I guess what I'm saying is, in the short term, we haven't monetised them. It's a little bit like TV was, 10, 15 years ago, when they were told you've got to have your digital stations and we'll eventually turn off the analogue. In about 15 years' time, they'll do the same to radio, I'm sure, and sell the spectrum or use it, sell it to mobile companies or whatever. So it will happen. We've got to get ready for it. And that's all media companies have to be flexible and adaptable, but they also have to be strategic and get ready.
I think the biggest thing we've got to focus on is not ourselves for 5 minutes, but actually, it's true. Like, I think we've got to talk about our clients, because at the end of the day, if we can find ways to prove that certain channel mixes, certain opportunities, certain integration ideas, cross-selling across 10 different, platforms or communication messages can actually deliver a better return on investment, actually deliver clients more sales, which at the end of the day is what we're all about. We're all there to try to grow market share in each of our different businesses. If we can do that, then they'll continue to invest more money with us. One of the things that we launched last week as a group was an exclusive deal with Neuro Insight, which is a company that's been around for a number of years. We did a lot of great work with this organisation in the lead up to the Beijing Olympics to prove the power of engagement around the Olympics. It was always this little finger in the air when we used to take the Olympics to market and saying, yeah, it's the highest engaging property to place your brand within, but we could never articulate by how much versus what program. How was it 15% more engaging than putting a spot in Pack the Rafters? Was it 50% more engaging than putting a spot in the AFL on a Friday night? And we actually were able to prove the premium that actually then helped clients move their business forward. So we've done an exclusive deal with these guys to find ways to actually monetize our programs more effectively for our clients to hopefully get them to sell more product. That's what we've got to get better at, and we've got to take the focus away from CPM. We can't just keep focusing on cost per thousand. It is always going to have a place, but we've got to start to change the metrics, because we know that TARPs are not built equal. There are certain programs with certain communication messages that work more effectively in Program X than Program Y, and Program X might be 20% smaller ratings than Program Y, but that may deliver a better return on investment for that brand, and depending on what that message is. And we've got to get smarter at understanding the power of our shows and our channels, and the power of how TV and online work together more effectively. How does the social media tools and platforms like Fango work when we've got 60% of people playing around with their iPhone or their iPad or their Samsung Galaxy phone while they're watching X Factor? Well, what is the engagement then when they're on that second screen or that third screen? And we're about to enter some really exciting research around the final week of X Factor to actually learn and understand that, so that we can share that and actually help advertisers, I think, use their marketing dollars more effectively, which at the end of the day will hopefully then help them make more money, and that will help us grow our pie. And I think that's the conversation that we want to have with clients.
I guess my observation of that, I've been watching media companies around the world, a lot of them chasing mass audiences for what end? We've seen, say, The Guardian, one of the biggest websites in the world, extraordinary audience. It's going down the tube very fast. It's a philanthropic organisation, basically, but it can't turn those people into money. The New York Times has a mass audience. It had its quarterly profit announced today, 2.5 million, which we'd be out of business if we were doing that at the West. It's interesting, like the Fairfax model, and the Fairfax is coming from a position as being the second player in Sydney and Melbourne against the Herald Sun and the Daily Telegraph. They have a huge online audience, and their challenge at the moment, they put all their eggs in that basket. The newspapers are falling away quite quickly. They're trying to save this business by trying to turn that mass audience into money. They haven't figured it out yet, but and what we're going a different way. We've realised we have a very, very big audience that buy our newspaper. It's 190,000 during the day, 300,000 on weekends. But one of the historical quirks of newspapers, which is quite extraordinary, is we don't really know who buys our newspaper. Our home delivery audience is probably close to 40%. But traditionally in newspapers, this is just not Western Australia, it's internationally as well, there's been a distributor who controls who throws that paper over the fence, and they control when that person decides whether they're going to renew their contract or let it expire. That happens, and we know nothing about that person who buys it. So we've had quite a big technological program going on within our company in the last year or two to get control of that audience, and we've got our marketing department's over on one of the tables here, and they can't wait to get that information of pretty well 100,000 people, and how we can then start slicing and dicing that information. We can start then marketing to those people, not just the newspaper, but other products. So I guess my point is we have a very, very big, strong core audience, and we want to build on that and sell them different things and find out what they want to buy off us and what they need from us, rather than trying to chase mass audiences, which we don't really know what to do with.
I think you just made a really interesting point about leveraging. You've got a really strong brand, and clearly media companies are facing some real challenges at the moment, because a lot of the traditional content that people used to pay for is given away for free. And so finding ways to leverage your brand into other areas, I think, is going to be absolutely crucial. It's interesting to think what's happened with the music industry, which is obviously one of the first industries to be impacted by the digital revolution. I'm sure we all remember Napster, and long extinct, but the implications of that. And obviously people in the music industry used to be able to make zillions of dollars by selling CDs and albums. Well, you can't do that anymore. Young people especially have got used to the idea that you just download music pretty much for free or very low cost. So things like concerts, events, which you can think of as a high value service linked to the music content, that's become the way to monetize the content. And that's probably going to be the way of the future, I suspect, for many media companies as well. They're really in a situation where the content is free or available very, very cheaply online. So how do you leverage that brand? And you probably have to be creative and go off into some other services in order to get a return for continuing to provide that content.
Just a quick yes/no for the panel, if I may. Would you think it was fair for your organisations to be paid by results rather than being paid for audience?
It's risky. It's risky. Look, it's a tough one. We've got, without talking out of school, we have a couple of deals that work on that sort of philosophy. You can't do too many of them, though. Not in the current way that our business is structured. Over time, I think more and more it will go that way. I think. And I think, that's just the accountability, I think, of the way that the business and the media is moving, Clients want to spend X and they want to know they can get a return of Y. So there's definitely a lot more skin in the game than I think we had 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. But, at this point, you can only do a couple of them. because it's a risky one.
Adam, that assumes that all marketing campaigns are tactical, though, in a way, doesn't it? And a lot of campaigns are brand. In fact, we've just got an example where it worked the opposite way. I think it was a real estate company that had a campaign with us, which they cut off last month because they'd been so successful that they couldn't keep up. So we lost money by being too successful.
Adam, can I just add, while you're waiting for the microphone there, I think media owners broadly are open to shared risk. I don't think they're open to taking all the risk. And one of the reasons from my experience to what Adam has just alluded to is that, if the creative's crap, or if the offer's rubbish, or if it's a highly competitive environment, or if you're offering a product that only works on rainy days and it's sun shining, or the economy's taken a dive, or all the other variables that the media owner does not control and cannot control, that's not fair. So I think media owners are open for fairness, and I think what we're seeing a lot more of now is shared risk in terms of the media owner, the media agency almost acting as a broker, and the marketer or the client starting to figure out different ways of measuring success.
And I think the deals that I'm referring to are deals where it's housed within our entire group, so there are no other external factors outside of the creative, and we actually work with the brands on creative through the Neuro deal that we've got, where we can actually help test their creative, look at the iconic triggers, look at the points within their TVC that work effectively, and then they can actually use those within billboards, within outdoor, within other platforms online, and use the points of the communication that is the strongest within their brand to actually hopefully give them a return on investment. So, that what's exciting is that these conversations have been happening for a while, and there's more of them coming, and more of the big brands want to talk directly with us around how they can get better learnings and to use the platforms, which is super exciting.
I would rephrase the question, actually. I don't think fairness is the point. I think that's what happens anyway. It's called the market. I mean, if advertisers don't see value in being on Channel 7 or the West Australian or Mix, then they won't advertise. If students don't see the value of running up a HECS debt in order to get a degree so they get a better job at the end of it, they won't come. So the fair or not is not the point. The market will make those decisions anyway.
Cool. Thanks, guys. Meredith?
Yep. Gillian Lowe has said, loving our panel members. Question, what is the secret to your success?
Look, I live in a factory next door to the coffin shedders. I'm a complete loser. So there's no point in asking me about success. In terms of professional success, I think that, look, that woman's horrified. Look at her. Look at her. She's horrified at the thought. Look, I think that for me, it's about, and I do talk a little bit about this sometimes, I think that it's about being curious, taking risks, following your intuition and your heart. I've never been good at planning things. There's that old Jewish saying, man plans, God laughs. And so I just do what intrigues me, and that's what I've done. And hold true to my values, which is often the courage of my convictions and thinking, that you've got to do the right thing.
Look, I think mine's really comes down to a couple of really simple things. Just a whole lot of hard work and not being too afraid to ask too many questions and not making out you know everything, but listen hard and listen really hard when you've got the chance to listen to some people that know what they're talking about. The other thing is strategy and planning. I think one of the things I learnt really early on in the TV business was you can't progress and the business doesn't roll forward unless you have a really good plan, one that you can follow, but one that you're also willing to check in on and adjust and tweak. And one of the big things that we're really strong on at Seven is having a very clear plan. So we know exactly what our strategy is for the next 12 to 18 months from a sales point of view. All we'll do is tweak it along the way through, and then that's extending out into the broader business 3 to 5 year plan. So we know exactly where we want to head. And that's a really big focus of ours, making sure we spend the time to get out of the day-to-day hustle and bustle. Everyone's busy, I think it's one of the hot topics at the moment. When you ask someone how they are, they go, I'm busy. Well, everyone's as busy as each other, but you've got to make time to plan. And if you plan and you put the right strategies in place, then I think you're going to give yourself every chance to succeed. And I think as a company, that's what we're doing really well at the moment as well, not just personally, but professionally.
I don't think it really changes from the first day you started work to whether you've been in the company for 10, 20 or 30 years. I agree with a lot of things. You've got to have curiosity and passion and a willingness to learn, and then keep building on what you've learned, and keep yourself open to learning new things and taking new challenges, because or you're not going to always pull everyone off, but the more you take, you'll start kicking more goals. But even now, I think to be relevant now, to be relevant. The business is changing so fast. You have to be sucking in a lot of knowledge. And what's interesting about our businesses now, it used to be you could only compare yourself to a small group of people around you. Now we can see what my business, what the New York Times is doing, what the Guardian's doing, what the Daily Mail is doing. We can go through their editorial rooms, their editorial plans. We can look at marketing strategies. There's a whole wealth of information out there, and we can see what's working, what's not, and then you pick up what you want from that and adapt it to your circumstances. And so I think you need a very world view, but a very local way that you act.
I mean, what's success? I'm not sure, but on a personal level, happiness is obviously very important, and for me the secret of that is to, in your professional life anyway, is to do something you enjoy. And if you're lucky enough like me to do something that you really enjoy and you've been able to do it for a long time, that goes a long way.
The other thing I'd add with a lot of our journalists is fear of going out and not bringing back the story. It's always a constant.
I think there's quite a few, and the guys have mentioned them. I think it's a bit of a wanky term, but your reputation is your brand. And so as I look around the room, many of you are still young, and I think all of us were sat where you are one day, and there were other people, there still is today, on the panel, and you kind of wonder how they got to where they were. So I think it's based on relationships, and I think the longer I spend in this industry, the more I realise the fewer, smaller group of people that I've known and I've worked with for 17 years. And the people, when I was a sales rep, selling direct advertising on Austereo actually in Canberra, the account managers in the agencies that I was selling to are now CEOs of agencies. So I think relationships is really important. I think your personal reputation is the most important thing of all. And I think that when you become a manager, if you want to go down that road, invest in people and give everything you can to make those people better, because you want them to be better and you want to be better yourself. And finally, don't get drunk at work functions.
I think we've got time for a couple more questions.
With more people self-selecting and choosing their own media and content, do you guys see that as a threat or an opportunity to your current business models?
It's both, really. Say, just taking the West Australian example, what we do is we go and find and filter a lot of information, and we present it to you for $1.50 every day, what we think is a good package that hopefully you need or you want to be part of for that day. You don't have to do that. You can go and you can spend a lot more time finding what interests you. So if you want to invest that time, you can do it for nothing. So we have to, it's a threat because yes, people can find the information wherever they want. It's an opportunity because we can harness that as well, but also we have to figure out what we do which is still unique and relevant to people. And so it's a matter of finding stories, content, whether it's videos, information which we think is still good value for money for what we do.
I think that it's a massive opportunity. Again, radio is a medium that relies totally on its engagement with its listener. It's free anyway, so we don't have that pressure, but it's about connecting with as many people as possible. So we can use our online and our social media to extend our brand and for engage even further with our listeners. We can have pictures and video. We can, people love the user-generated content opportunities that radio can point them to. Nothing's better than radio for driving people to websites, and our listeners will use
That's
it.
a big call.
It's proven.
We got 2.9 million people watching a month on +7, catching up on our great shows.
Yeah. So, as I was saying, sorry about that commercial on my left. We fast forward through that, shall we?
Well, you made a big bold statement there. I disagree.
So basically,
I'm backing up my colleague from 7 West too here.
Thank you very much.
For us, it's a massive opportunity because people already have that intimacy that they feel with radio, and so this gives them the opportunity to respond. I think that our shows are what drives a lot of that familiarity and the intimacy and so on, and people love being part of the shows. So it is a really big opportunity for us. It gives us a lot more content to offer to our audience.
Well, my colleagues on the panel are in the industry, so they're seeing it firsthand. My observation as an outsider is that in general terms, perhaps not so much for radio, but for TV and print media, my observation would be it's a huge challenge rather than, and maybe some opportunities around the margin, but let's face it, the major media organisations around the world that a few years ago controlled TV channels, controlled major print media, they had an enormous advantage, an enormous amount of leverage. They owned a very, very valuable property, and the foundations of that power structure have been eaten away and undermined, and we can see perhaps the West Australian is still strong, but you can see media organisations all around the world which were once very, very powerful, whose business models have been undermined. So my observation as someone who's not inside the industry, admittedly, is that for many of the traditional major players, it's a threat rather than an opportunity.
I just disagree. I think we've got more people watching free-to-air TV than we did 3 years ago. We're engaging our content online. As I said, we've got 8.8 million users on Yahoo 7, 2.9 million people catching up on our shows and our content online. We're in a fantastic place. This fragmentation's been here for some time. It's not going away, as we've said. It's going to continue to be there, but it comes down to the quality of the content. People can upload and put whatever content they want, user-generated online, but people still want to be entertained. They want great quality content. Look at the cinema numbers over the last 12, 18 months. The guys in that industry are creating some of the most exciting and great, movie content that we've seen for probably a decade. Their numbers are going through the roof, and that highlights that content is king. So as long as we can continue to invest in our content and develop it, and then use the internet, use IPTV when it comes, use the NBN and the power of that to actually then distribute it, then we're in a great place. So, of course there's going to be the fringe players. That's the long tail. We've got to continue to worry about the head and those big eyeballs, and that's what we're focused on, delivering content that can still reach 2-3 million people in 30 minutes of TV, and you can place your brand there and reach more consumers than any other platform. Try to chase that online, you're going to have to buy 150 different websites. We can do it in one 30-second execution, and we'll continue to.
Mine
Okay,
won't
Paul.
be an ad. If we think it's tough now, it's we haven't started. The guys mentioned connected TV and mobile before. In the next 24 months, what we're talking about today will just seem piffle. That the amount of content that you're going to have access to, we're going to have access to as consumers, is going to be literally unlimited. 25% of all televisions sold in Australia last year were connectable to the internet. Only 25% of that 25% were actually connected to the internet. There's a massive tsunami coming to this market in terms of a change in consumer behaviour, and it's a combination of having a 42-inch screen in our living rooms, or many of them I should say. on which you can access any content you want. You don't have to necessarily take the content that's available to you now. And secondly, you can also then consume that content on any device, anytime, anywhere, however you choose. We have got more structural change coming in this industry in the next 2 years than we've had in the last 60.
Cool. Time for one more question, I hope.
I've just got a general question. How do you find that Google's actually influencing your businesses, just in general?
Minimally, as far as I would say. I mean, it's obviously advertising dollars are increasing with internet, but with Google, you know, I can't break that down. Paul can probably give us some more numbers on that, but I would never be able to say, you know, Google's suddenly a big... I mean, our primary competitors are still television and other radio stations, really, and internet, obviously, because you're looking at a whole marketing pie.
Look, they're a threat without question, but also they're an opportunity for us as well, depending on how we decide to use that, you know, that beast, and they are a beast. So, you know, there are things in train on that front as well in terms of our thinking and thought process, but yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure really financially, but I mean, we find a lot of people coming to our website, less and less straight to the west.com.au. They'll come through Google or Facebook, you know, particularly Google searches, so you want to get up as high as you can on there. A lot more coming through Facebook and Twitter as well. So the way people are coming into websites is changing quite quickly. The old sort of way of just having a homepage and then diving off from there is becoming less and less important. People are coming in through the side door on some other story and then finding their way in. So we get a lot of business out of Google.
Well, clearly Google is now one of the world's most important advertising companies, and something like AdWords, which didn't exist a few years ago, is a major competitor to traditional forms of advertising. But of course, it's fascinating how quickly things change, and Google, like Facebook and some of the others, are now facing their own challenges because it's a lot more difficult for them to practice their business model in a small screen mobile environment than it is in the traditional desktop or laptop. So even Google perhaps is facing a few challenges in the not too distant future.
I think Google have given rise to the phrase frenemy. So if you're a media owner or a marketer, particularly a media owner, there are turfs on which Google is a friend and they assist you, clearly directing traffic to your media owner, media properties. And they can be an enemy in terms of competing with you for the advertising dollar. So I think they're not one or the other. I think they're both at different times.
Okay. Thank you, everyone, for participating. Thank you very much to the panel. Please join me in thanking the panel.